policy and what a public policy is all about. So, policy, we understood that it is typically described as a principle or a rule to guide decisions to achieve some preconceived objectives. So, like there are some problems, we are trying to understand that problem, we decide the course of action to solve the problem, or there is any issue, and what we try to achieve. So, we already decide our outcomes, our objectives, and on the basis of that, so understanding the problem and outcome relationship, we decide upon a course of action, that this is the most suitable course of action, and by following this course of action, we will be able to solve the problem. We will be able to address the issue and get the stipulated, get the preconceived results. So that's the policy is all about. So definitely it is a course of action, right? Okay, and when it comes to the governmental policies, which is trying to understand the social needs, social issues, the problems which we have in society, economic problems. So definitely it has to be based on the societal values, and it deals with the matters, concerns of the society. So it is very necessary that a policy should be broad enough, it should be inclusive, it should be visionary, right? So there should be a short term and long term impact of that policy. A policy should bring change, and by change I means positive change into the society, right? It should uplift, or it should empower, or it should solve the problem. So in that way we have to conceive the policy, that it should include all, it should be broad, right? It should not have a very narrow vision. It should be, it should be quite comprehensive in its nature. And then policy set the direction, because it channelizes the whole government activity. So it gives us that direction, it gives us that that course of action which is the most just, which is the most rational, based on rule of law, and which includes everybody. Policy should not make any person or any community or any group within the society worse off. So the policy should target in such a way that maximum benefit should reach to the maximum citizens of the of nation. And when it comes to the public policy in India, it is the Indian citizens. And a policy should definitely express the standards. It should express the will, the political behavior, and the expectations to guide action. So what course of action we are choosing, while understanding the problem, while deciding about the outcomes, and while deciding about the course of action, definitely our standards, our political values, our societal interest, everything, and citizens' expectations, everything should guide, everything should influence the policy making process. Then definitely, right, okay, when there is a policy, then there is an intended outcome. So always it has to be seen that policy uh, evaluation, or when the policy is implemented, the result should match the outcome, right? And whether it's matching or whether it's not matching, all the results should be taken into account. The experience of the previous policy should be included while making the present and for the future policies. And then definitely policy is a statement of principle. So there are multiple characteristics, multiple features of that what a policy can be, right? One thing we have to keep in mind, that policy are distinct from procedure and guidelines. It is different from procedure and guidelines. Policies, within the policy there will be various procedures and various guidelines, right? So policy is basically a compilation of various procedures, guidelines, which helps, right? And the operational procedures interpret the policy, because the policies are made up of all these things. So don't get confused between it is a guideline. No, it is not a guideline. Policy, a well structured, well planned operational procedural design framework. That's a policy is all about, right? So like in the last class we did, there is no single definition of policy, and we in the last class we did various scholars ideas like Abraham Kaplan or Thomas Nye. So one commonality between all the definition is that it is a course of action which is adopted by any organization or individuals. It is a course of strategy. It is a plan of action to do something, right? Thomas Dye sums up very aptly that it is what the government says, the government say to do or do not, right? Okay, basically it is public policy is all about what the government is doing and what the government is not doing. And we had a discussion about that, what we understand by what the government is not doing, right? There are priorities, government has limitations. So, government has to understand the need, government has to understand the relevance, the crucial need of that art, and on the basis of that government prioritize. So it is, public policy is just not only limited to what the government is doing, we have to understand what the government is also not doing. So in that, so that completes the whole story, right? Public policy, importantly, it tells about three important things. The first is the intention, right? Okay, that what is the intention of the government is. Public policy is a very sound example. It is a very, fruitful, productive, reliable platform by which space, I should say, right? Okay, through which we actually understand that this government, what is the intentions of this government, right? Okay, that or how the government is understanding the society's problem. So public policy is a very good reflection of the intention of the legislature. Second, it is a very good reflection of the direction in which the legislature wants to steer society. Because today's public policy, the policies which are getting implemented and which are running within the society, is actually deciding the future. It's actually shaping the future of the nation, right? So if the policies are doing very good, so definitely our future is good, right? Okay, if policy related to education, policy related to food, health, because of the pandemic, so now the health security, it was always there, but now we have to approach it from a more pragmatic point of view. So because the pandemic of such a scale any country have never seen. So every country has to now revisit, right? Okay, its health policies, right? And has to build the infrastructure more accurately, including the whole pharmaceutical sector is also working in close collaboration with the government. So health security today has taken a new dimension and has become so crucial. So the any policy related to health security is definitely is going to shape our future. So it is a good reflection of that, in which direction the government wants to steer the society. That is the steering, you understand the driving analogy, that is steer. So with the steering thing, right, you can control, right? Okay, the wheel of the development, right? Okay, and you can either take it forward, or you can with the back policies it can go backward. So or it can lead to a stagnation of the economic growth and the sustainable growth. So it is a good reflection of the direction. And second, public policy also tells us about the natural resources, the availability of the natural resources, the accessibility of the natural resources, or proper utilization of the natural resources. What the government is doing with the resources, whether resources are optimally utilized or not, and sustainability are also a factor. It's not like that we finish all the resources now and nothing is left for the future. So sustainable utilization of the resources to to achieve outcome or to solve the issues is very important. So how tactfully, keeping in mind the budget, keeping in mind all the infrastructural limitations and all, public policy is talking about the intention, direction, and the utilization of the resources, right? So now let us start with the policy process. So this is basically a cyclical process. Please, in books also you will get many diagrams, right? So I just picked from one of the book for you. So you can make this cyclical diagram, right, which basically talks about. So here we are basically talking about this is the story. This is the diagram of the policy cycle or the policy process, right? So what is happening here? So first important stage in the policy cycle is that we have to realize the problem, right? Identification of the problem is important, right? So assessment of the problem is very important. Then after assessing the problem, understanding the core issues, related problems, and etc., right? Okay, after doing the close scrutiny of the problem, it is third stage is about finding a solution to the problem, right? And then implementing the solution and then reviewing the impact. So that's basically, these are the 5 important activities which are happening within the policy cycle. So these activities is summed up into 4 different stages. So first is the agenda building, right? Okay, what is happening in the agenda building? In agenda building, an issue gets the attention of the government. So there are some problems, right? Okay, which gets the government's attention. Those problems are so grave, so serious that government has to do something about that problem. So that's about the agenda building, right? This is very necessary. This is a very necessary stage, because all the issues may not be necessary, may not be that significant that it needs to get the attention of the government, or at the point, right? Okay, there are lots of issues. So how the government is going to prioritize? So this is one of the very early and the most crucial element within the policy cycle, because the identification and the agenda building is very important, right? Okay, like in the public policy circle, we say that a correct identification of a problem and a correct policy formulation is a half solved. It is like a half solved problem, right? Okay, so half of the problem gets solved in the very first place when we identify the problem properly and we formulate a policy properly, right? Okay, even before implementation. So it is very necessary. I mean, when I always talk about a public policy, right? Okay, I always draw analogy with the medicine, right? Like we go to the doctor, and if the doctor with some sickness or some disease, so if the doctor understands the problem properly, right? Okay, then he will give us the medicine, and we will be completely okay. So we all experience the same thing. So just get into the shoe of the thing, that till the time that the doctor is not understanding the problem properly, right? Okay, he or she will not be able to give the proper medicine, and we will not be able to recover from the sickness. So the diagnosis of the problem is very necessary into the medicine. The same exact thing is happening in the public policy also. This is the most easiest way to understand that why understanding the problem very necessary. We have to understand the problem, we have to understand the disease, right? Then only we will be able to correctly identify, correctly prescribe the medicine, right? So the medicine here is the correct policy, and disease here is the issues and the needs of the society, right? Okay, the poverty, etc., is like a disease, right? So when we understand the core reasons behind the problem, right? Okay, so understanding the problem itself, it has many issues, right? Okay, understanding the problem, understanding the reasons, right? Okay, from where the problem is coming. So all the nitty-gritties of the problem is very necessary. So agenda building is the very important step. Then on the basis of when we are done with the identification of the problem, right, then policy formulation or the policy decision stage comes into the picture. And what is happening here? So like we discussed that the interested party fights, right? Okay, and different interest groups are there, right? Okay, so there will be group A, there will be group B. So one groups maybe have a different interest and wants a policy in their favor. Group B wants a policy in their favor. So the pressure groups plays a crucial role. Lobbyist, networking, everything comes into the picture. And on the basis of that, after debate, discussion, right, um, the policy draft is formulated, then it goes to the parliament. In the state level, it goes to the it went back to the executive, and again the policy is revisited, right? So the policy formulation or the policy decision is that part. Once the policy is passed by the parliament or by the governor, right, then and gets the signature of the president, right, then it is implemented. So implemented basically means that now the government enforces the policy within the society, right? So now it is getting implemented, and everybody has to follow, or everybody will get benefits out of that policy. Then the last part comes is the policy evaluation, right? Okay, so the policies in facts are studied, right? Okay, whether the policy is able to achieve the stipulated within the stipulated time, whether it is able to achieve the preconceived outcomes or not, right? Okay, what are the challenges, what are the problems it faced, what are the good points, bad points, the negative and the positive things, right? Okay, and how we can make the policy more better. So all the results are taken into account, analyzed, and then sent back into the very first stage. So when next year, the next time when this policy will be run again, so the experiences will be used, and then again the policy will be on the basis of that, the policy will be redefined or restructured. Okay, so what are the characteristics of the policy, right? It is authoritative, definitely. Once it is passed, right, it gets the authoritative, and the legislature use the authority to enforce it, right? Okay, another characteristic is enforceable. All policies are made to be enforced on the society. It is flexible and adaptable, definitely, right? Okay, policy has to be based on the current social needs, right? Okay, and it should not be rigid. It should be flexible enough to 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 gel well with the needs and with the society, right? Okay, and a good policy is one which is adaptive in nature. So on the basis of that, once it is implemented, the moment we get the reactions, we see the results, right? Okay, then we can bring necessary changes into the policy. So it should not be rigid, or it should not be static, right? It should be highly accommodative and flexible also. Another thing is that policy should be feasible enough. It should not be costly. Remember, a good policy is one where we do the cost benefit analysis, and input cost should be less than the output. Definitely, when it comes to the public policy, right? Okay, the social satisfaction, the reduction of hunger, right? These are the things. It's not like that we are investing money and we are getting high profit, right? So here the government profit is not only the finances. The government profit is also the welfare, happiness, satisfaction, social justice, gender equity, all these things. So many subjective values are also the government's achievement are, right? Okay, a good policy's achievement are. So it should be feasible enough, feasible in a sense that it should be something which is realistic, right? So government should not make such a policy which is impossible to implement, right? So it should be feasible, it should be within that budget, right? So feasibility means all these various things, right? That profit orientation is not the not the first goal, right? Priority. The welfare of the society is the priority, right? Then another important characteristics of a good policy is that there has to be a clarity, right? Okay, a policy should be crystal clear. So there should be no haphazardness, there should be no confusion, and it should not be complex, right? Okay, it should be clear, it should be uniform, and it should be non-discriminatory, right? Another important thing, it should be transparent. Every stakeholder, and especially the citizens, should know about the policies, right? Citizens should be well informed about the policies, that how the policy is going to be implemented, when the policy is going to be implemented, who will get the benefit out of it, what all are the provisions within the policy, right? So a well documented policy is very necessary, and and the citizen should be informed about. The citizen should be well informed. So the more the policy is transparent, more it is beneficial for the society, and more it will bring the government and the people, the citizen, close to each other, right? So transparency is a very important, a vital attribute of a good policy. And then consultative, right? So consultative means that policies should not be made by just two people, or just should not be made by the leaders sitting in the AC room and all. All the multiple stakeholders who can be a part or who can contribute to the policies, and most importantly, the citizens should be consulted, right? And the people who are facing the problem, or the people for whom the policy is made, they should be the part of the policy. So consultation can be done by various ways. Governments can do surveys on the basis of pilot projects. Many think tank, many academic group, many research scholars, work on the same topic. So their surveys, their interviews, their research results can be taken into account. Then media, civil society, NGO, and for many policies, even the international organizations like UNDP's projects with their reports, their data, the active groups, right? Okay, the working groups from the different organizations should be consulted in order to make the policy more effective, more efficient, and more problem oriented, right? Okay, the more the accurate the policy will be, the more easy will be the task for the governments, and the more we will be able to solve the problem faster and sooner. Okay, so definitely, let's see that what are the scopes of the public policy. By now you have understood that its range is immense, right? And because it is a government's activity, so everything under the sun, right? Whatever the government is doing, so its range is immense. So it's just not only economics, it's just not only society, right? It is everything, right? Okay, it is impacting all the variables within the ecology, right? And it is also connecting the environment and the administration. Public policy is a link between the environment and the administration, right? Then definitely it is expanding the government activities, right? Public policy, like I said, for the social security, for the health, it is for the workers, for the safety. I just kept few examples for you. Then in public policy, environmental sustainability, climate change, proper waste management, everything is taken into account, whether it is making houses, whether it is making recreational activities, PWD works, how to preserve our art and architecture, land, property of aesthetics, right? Heritage sites, conservation of their heritage sites, and also very important, through public policy, like I said earlier, also like eliminating equality, any kind of a discrimination can be eliminated through public policy. It can bring gender justice, right? Women empowerment, marginalized people's welfare for the marginalized people, or the weaker sections of the society. So through public policy, government can and government is reaching to the weaker sections of the society, and efforts are made to bring them to the mainstream, right? So the scope, like it is not easy, and the scope is just not these 7 points, right? It is like unending, right? Okay, scope are so big and so comprehensive. So it is very hard, but I gave you a good idea, right? Okay, that to go to 360-degree perspective and think about that, in which all areas you can see the relevance and you can see the presence of the public policy. So this is just a glimpse of the scope of the public policy. So now we start with the overall policy cycle. So on the basis of what we studied, that there is an identification of the problem needs to be done, and then on the basis of that, policy is formulated, right, then implemented, and then evaluated. So now let's see it in a more structured way. So what is happening here? So basically, these 3 stages are within this. This is the first stage, and in that first stage, these 4 steps are taken, and then second step deals with the the 5 stages are taken in the first stage, and the sixth step is here. It is the second stage, and the step 7 is the third stage, right? So we will pick up one, and we will say that okay, what is happening here. Okay, so this is the the structured policy cycle is all about. So let's start with the first, that is the policy formulation, or the agenda setting, or the problem identification. So what we are doing here, like we discussed, it involves the identification of the problem issue or the policy issue, right, and which requires the attention of the government, definitely the policy maker. So the process involves here that how that the members should identify the needs, the desires, the demands, right, okay, the aspirations, the expectations, or the problems, or the problems through which this by of which the citizens were suffering, right? So all these things has to be taken care of, and it should reach to the policy maker, and then the policy maker will decide about which issues should be taken as an agenda for further deliberation, right? Then definitely this settings of the policy agenda happens, right, where issues are getting prioritized, and correlations between issues are identified, right? Okay, for example, in the last class I just quickly give you example of, suppose literacy is a problem, so related problem is poverty, unemployment. So it is an interconnected problem. So always the idea is that make a policy in such a way that through one policy these three issue points can be tackled or can be addressed upon. So you pick up any policy, whether it's a Manrega, whether it's a NFSA, whether it's a right to education, right, through everything, right? Okay, so it is a public policy is highly interconnected. So it's not like that a right to education is only addressing the education problem, right? It addresses the education problem in such a way that it touches the health, it touches the gender justice ideas, it touches the the discrimination problem, right? Okay, it touches the health issues. So the policy is designed in such a way that by targeting the main priority, right, okay, it should involve and it should address the rest of the other problems also, because it's the poverty, education, hunger, malnutrition, these are not separate problems or not compartment problems. They all are the part of the same problem. So definitely our approach to the problem, our approach to a policy design and the policy itself should be multifaceted, right? Okay, and it should address multiple problems, right? But again, like I said, it should be clear. So in process of addressing multiple problems, it should not create confusion, right? And it should not be complex. So that's the beauty of the design of the public policy. So which further you will study also when like if you go for the masters, and also we will go more deep into the policy design, right? But that's the beauty, that multiple problems, multifaceted public policy, but still clear, transparent, right, comprehensive. So that's the beauty of the policy design is. So so the agenda setting is important. The setting of the policy agenda allows a policymaker definitely to analyze the critically policy requirement, right? Issue identification should also be done in order, keeping in mind the future, the short term, the long term techniques. So there are various techniques, and then policy related issues, their origin, their source, like I said, that understanding that which all the organization should be involved, what should be their responsibilities, what should be their duties, right? So talking to them, doing consultations, and after that the issues are prioritized, right? So this is the very first stage within the first stage of the public policy, that is the agenda setting, right? So don't get confused, these are the main stages. This policy formulation includes these 5 steps. Okay, so we are going this step wise. Okay, so let's see more about the policy agenda. So what basically here we are doing, right? Okay, few things we have to keep in mind. I mean, the policymaker should keep in mind that problems, all the problems that exist in society, do not transform into a political issues, right? So the issues which are crucial, the issues which are impacting a huge amount of huge sections of the people, and the issues which are creating tensions between the society, those get the political attention, right? And all issues definitely do not produce policies, right? So you understood, by agenda setting, by deciding, by consultation and all, right? Okay, the policies, the problems seriousness, the problems initiation point, the complexity of the problem, everything is taken into account, and then it is then the agenda setting is done. So it's not necessary that at the very first place all the policies within the society will get converted into a policy. It's not happen like that. And apart from all these things, budget constraint, time limitations, geopolitical scenario, everything has to be taken into account while addressing agenda setting, right? Then definitely all policies do not invite implementation. It also has to be understand that all the only policy which is selected, right? Okay, so all the policy draft will not be implemented. The most suitable policy draft will get passed and then it will be implemented. And all the policy has their stated objective, but there can be a difference between stated objective and real performance, right? So it's not necessary that it should affect the society in a manner intended, right? Because when it comes to the social problems, social issues, right? Okay, the active society, things might change many a times. How much you design policy, right? But policy may get implemented, all the results may vary, and most of the time it varies from the stipulated stated objective. So the experiences should be taken into account. So these are the things which should be in the mind of the policymaker while designing the policy, right? Okay, that there is always a scope to improve. To no policy is a perfect policy, like we discussed, remember? So again, I am telling you, in each class I say that try to connect your theories. So the public policy is an amalgamation of proper planning, proper organization, right? Budgeting, proper staffing, all the multiple stakeholders. So you can understand whatever theories we had studied till now, all their basic ideas can be, we can see that it is getting implemented. For example, bureaucracy is a very important part from the policy design to the policy implementation and to the evaluation. Bureaucracy is there. So a good effective, right, and well coordinated bureaucracy is necessary. Another important theory, like we do, is the rational decision making. So you can see that a policy, even starting from the agenda setting to the end, it's all about decisions, right? And we studied that from the bounded rationality of the Herbert Simon, that a decision maker has its limitations. So here the decision maker is a policy maker. So policy maker should always be aware of its own limitations, right? So definitely, like there cannot be a no perfect rational decision. So what Herbert Simon is talking about, satisfying, right, decision making. He is talking about the bounded rationality. So exactly, right, okay, implement the theory here that the policy makers understanding of the problem is also governed by bounded rationality. So he will not be able to understand the problem properly, select the best course of action, but will definitely opt for the most satisfying course of action, right? So definitely, right, okay, when the policy problem is cannot be understood properly, right, okay, so stated objectives or implementation and the result may vary, right? But being a policy maker, being not completely rational, but by governed by bounded rationality, a policy maker should be aware of its limitations, right, okay, and it should use the experiences for the future. So you can see, you can now connect, right, okay, the theory with the practice, right? All what we have studied, they are not, they all make a meaning, they all make a story of public administration. So always have this perspective, back and forth. You should go to the theories, understand it, relate it, and then do the reflective thinking, and it should get reflected it should get reflected in your writing also, right? I mean, we always talk about the reflective thinking, and reflective writing is the most important thing. uh, yeah, and then definitely the constraints also the policy maker should understand. So identifying problem governs by two important things. The first is the political culture, and another important thing that a policy identification problem model cannot be just one uniform model. Culture to culture, countries to countries, it is different. Like we had studied in the ecological approach, developed country, underdeveloped country, agraria, industry. I remember prismatic, right? So Fredericks is making a point that each country has its own problems, each country has its own challenges. So we cannot have a one singular uniform model of policy, I mean the public policy, right? The stages are similar in every country, in every governmental activity. Fundamentally a policy design goes through these phases, right? But definitely, right, okay, poverty in India will be tackled differently than the poverty in United States or in Brazil. So every country has its own political culture, political values, social configuration, and on the basis of that policy is designed. So we cannot have a same policies, but policy model fundamentally remains the same. That is the policy formulation, policy implementation, and policy evaluation. Okay, so what are the policy instruments and source? Quickly see, definitely the government, the legislation, executive, taxation, through which the budget, all the budgetary allocation is done. Then the persuasion and the public pressure, also there is a public pressure. Then there are interest groups, all the stakeholders are involved. Minutes of the meetings, inspection, audits, legislative previous records, then media, community meetings, civil society, etc. These all play a very crucial role when it comes to the policy instruments, and these are the sources also through which the government gets to know about the policy problem, right? Then the last step, the second last step within the policy formulation is policy analysis, right? So it is a step-by-step process of unpacking and understanding the policy choices. So now when agenda is set out, we get all the sources. So now idea is that what are the alternatives we have, right? So it is a very crucial stage that here maximum alternatives are sketched upon, right? I mean, alternatives by here I mean that what the policy choices the government has to solve that problem, right? So it is an attempt to determine the cost benefit analysis of each possible alternative, right? Okay, so cost benefit analysis is basically the input cost and the output benefits, right? So remember here, benefit is just not only in terms of profits, finances, right? Benefits has to be taken care. It is a subjective idea, right? It has to be taken care in terms of social welfare also. So government has to take care of the social empowerment, gender justice, everything. The main, because we had already studied public and private administration difference, the main motive of the public administration is welfare of the citizens. Okay, so cost benefit analysis is done, right? And definitely, right, okay, the policy proposal which incurs less cost and gives maximum output, definitely that will be taken into consideration, right? Then the policy analysis, continual policy analysis is very necessary so that we can understand the comparison, right, the comparison between the various alternatives. So if we have to put in more lucid manner, what are the steps which are there in the policy analysis? The first is the identification of the values and the aspirations. So in the policy analysis, the values, the aspirations, the needs of the citizens are taken into consideration. Understand the problem in its context, right? So localization and the contextualization of the problem is important. A problem which is irrelevant, or the problem which has no relation with the society, with the people, is irrelevant for a policy analysis, right? So the problem has to be contextualized, right? Then identify. Then on the basis of that, various alternative courses of actions are identified, and then it is also decided that which dimension of the problem is the most important, right? Then then each alternatives cost benefit analysis done, and their uh, probable outcomes were also predicted, that plan A or policy is going to achieve this thing, policy B is going to achieve this thing, this is the cost of policy A, this is the cost of policy B, and so on. And on the basis of all this permutation and combination, the most suitable course of action is chosen against the policy problem, that is the values and the aspirations. Okay, so on the basis of that, like we discussed, what are the benefits of the policy analysis? Definitely, it helps us to understand the problem better. It helps us to select the most suitable course of action, right? It helps us to do the cost benefit analysis, so the feasibility, the realistic, and the keeping in mind the budget, keeping in mind the time, keeping in mind the aspirations, expectations, and the seriousness of the problem. Policy analysis helps us to choose the most possible and the most satisfying alternative, right? And it helps us to understand that resources are properly getting utilized or not, right? So the very crucial stage within the policy formulation is the policy analysis, right? Then the last stage is the stakeholder engagement and the consultation and the coordination, right? Like I discussed, that it is not a one man's show, it is not a one unit's show, that only the executive or this party is doing or this man is doing, right? Okay, policy, public policy, a success of public policy, a good public policy, or even the making of the public policy is the work, is the art, is the skill of multiple stakeholder partnership, right? Proper coordination. So it involves government, executive, judiciary, bureaucracy, Niti Aayog, for example, when it comes to India. And then civil society, media, right? Media plays a very important role. Then the role of media today also, we have to scrutinize. I mean, it has to be investigated, because media, like, it is a fourth pillar of the democracy. So it has a very crucial and has a very important role within the Indian democracy. So, and the public policy also, media plays a very, because media is a connect which helps the government and the society to know about each other. It helps the citizen what the government is doing, what the government is not doing, how the government is doing, and it helps the government to understand the people's aspirations, their sentiments, their moods. So it is a connect between the government and the citizens, and that's why its role is so important, right? So not only their role, right? Okay, the more the important role is, it ensures their accountability and their responsibility also. So a constant interaction, and like I said, people are very important. The people who are facing the problem, their aspirations, so they need to be consulted through a various ways, right? For the policy design. So constant interaction, public participation, these are the very important elements. And the more the stakeholders engagement is there in the public policy, the more the public policy will be able to achieve its goals. So that's the idea, that's the principle which works for the public policy, right? So what are the steps happens in the stakeholder engagement? Definitely the first thing is that we have to identify the correct stakeholders, right? Who organization, institutions, the target audience, who all can is getting affected by this policy. Then prioritize the stakeholders, right? Get to know and understand the stakeholders' role, responsibility, accountability, and then the proper relationship management, that is the proper communication, coordination, right? Direction, right? Okay, and how all the stakeholders should should be on the same page and should work for the common objective, right? So it's not like that each stakeholder is trying to get maximum out of it. No, everybody should commonly work together for a common objective, that is the welfare and the development of the society and whatever the problem is, right? So there should be a common target and all the stakeholders should be on the same page. So the next stage is the policy formulation and adoption. Formulation means after choosing, then it is getting adopted, right? What is happening here? I mean, the last stage within the policy formulation. So what are the factors needs to be considered here is that the policy recommendations are normally drafted by, for example, when it comes to the corporate or when it comes to government, senior top level bureaucrats, top level managers, and etc. And it also is a work of highest decision making, right? Then a policy formulation also reflects that the executive or the bureaucracy or the government has the ability to execute the policy, all the administrative, operational and managerial capacity the government possess to implement the decision. So these are the factors which needs to be considered just before the policy formulation, right? So after that the second stage starts. So once the policy formulation is done, so now the policy draft is ready, right? So what happens that the second stage is the policy implementation, right? So what is the policy implementation? It is basically a process of interaction between setting goals and the actions there to achieve them, right? So it is a stage between decision and operation, right? It is just, so now the decision is taken and before the implementation, so it involves after the decision is taken, I mean the course of action is selected upon and till the operation, right? Okay, this involves this policy implementation stage. So what is the use of this policy implementation stage? Definitely it gives the information, it makes the people aware of the policy, right? Inducement, basically it helps the people to adopt to the new behavior. Policy implementation informs people about what the, through the information people the citizens or the other stakeholders get to know about the policy design, what is there in the policy or what is going to do, how it is going to bring change. So the people, it helps the people to adapt to the new behavior, adapt to the new scenario. Then it also involves enforcement, that if people don't comply to that public policy, then because it has the authority, it has the legitimacy, it is enforceable by the law, within the rule of law, then the people will get the threat of penalties also. And then the benefaction, that is, it offers positive benefits to the society, right? Okay, to the people who comply to the public policy. So the policy implementations use is we can understand through these few points. Okay, but so this is also leads to the success of the policy, right? So, okay, when it gives the proper information, when people adapt to the behavior, when people comply to the just and the law rightful public policy, and then it brings positive benefits to the society. But what happens, right? Okay, there are definitely sometimes the policies cannot be implemented successfully. So when it is difficult to give the information, it is difficult to specify the details, right? Then it is not properly contextualized, right? Local preferences, people's problems are not identified properly, right? Or the implementation doesn't always agree with the policy objectives, right, as specified in the alternative. So the way it is getting implemented and the way it is stated, there is a difference. So there are within these points, right, you can understand that there are multiple ways through which a policy cannot be successfully implemented. So there is a term you often come through, is that the implementation gap, right? So what a implementation gap is all about, this is a gap between the policy implementation, right? Okay, so stated objective and how the policy is implemented. So there is a difference and it leads to the policy failure. So that's the policy implementation gap is all about. So implementation gap happens when there is no when there is a not correct, wrong identification of the problem, right? Okay, there is no coordination between the various stakeholders, no proper budgeting, no proper agenda setting. So all can lead to an implementation gap. The policy is not contextualized, not based on the people's needs. So all this can lead to the implementation gap, right? So the last stage is the policy evaluation. So once the course of action is decided, so it gets implemented. Okay, then once it is implemented, so implementation is done. So now the policy evaluation comes, right? So it is the post implementation stage, right? Okay, so now the policy is getting implemented. So here the success, the failure of the policy, the results of the policies are basically analyzed and assessed. So evaluation can be many things. It, like I said, right? Okay, because it's welfare, justice. So it is quantitative and qualitative. It can be both in nature, right? And there can be very tangible and intangible goals, right? Social, economic, environmental outcomes should be taken into account. So in the policy evaluation, basically the effects of the policies are understand, right? Information is gathered, processed, right? And policy evaluation is a very crucial stage because it provides the direction to the government, right? Okay, for the future. So what four important things evaluation process should look for? The first is the utility, right? Okay, what is the point of evaluating, right? Okay, so who wants the evaluation result and for what purpose? Without utility, just irrelevant baseless evaluation of a policy has no use. So utility should be kept in mind, that that how the evaluation result can be utilized for the future policies, right? Second thing is feasibility, that is, the evaluation procedure, whether it's a practical or not, right? So it should be immediate, right? Okay, it should be, it should understand the policy, the problem properly, right? Okay, within the resources, or whether the government, whether the country, whether our country has the expertise to evaluate the policy properly or not, right? So it needs correct data, it needs correct infrastructure, correct technology, correct information, right? Okay, we see, every day that whether it's opposition, whether it's the government, right? Okay, they all are talking about, the the failure of the public policies and all, right? Okay, so we have to cross check as an very, conscious citizen, that what are the time, resources, expertise, R&D are done, where research and research and, not the R&D properly, the R&D based feasibility factors are taken into account while evaluating or not. So whether the evaluation of a public policy is based on correct data, it is fact based, properly cross checked or not, right? Okay, so all the things has to be, as a citizen, as a students of political science, we should aware of, and we should investigate. The another point is the propriety, that is that evaluation is conducted in a fair and ethical manner or not, right? Okay, so evaluation should not be done to harm the government or to harm the opposition, right? Okay, so it should be done in a free, fair, and the most ethical manner. Then only, because here it is not about harming the government or harming the opposition. Here the society, the citizens, and the nation's development, nation's justice, nation's, image is at the stake, right? Citizens' life, their social security, right? Their aspirations are at the stake. So it has to be done in a very ethical manner. Then the accuracy, like I said, that proper information, proper, fact checking, proper data, right? Okay, each step is accurate or not. These all things should also be taken into account, and these are the four fundamental parameters which our evaluation process should all must look for. Okay, so what are the importance of the policy evaluation? Definitely, it is very important. For example, like documenting the policy development, right? Results, right? Documenting then in proper informing the implementation, assessing the support, compliance of the existing policy, because all the policies are multi-related. So till what point or how the existing policy is compatible to each other, provided support, provided the foundation, right? Then the impact and the values of the policy. It also creates a database, evidence base, which can be used for the future policies, and it also proves provides accountability for the resources invested. So resources here means not only the budget, the finances. It is also here means technology, the data, and all the stakeholders, right? So their accountability, their responsibility. So the policy evaluation involves, every resources and understand, and it assesses the accountability of all the stakeholders. Okay, so the how many types of evaluation are done? So it's not like that just the end result of the evaluation is done. No, right? Okay, three kind of an evaluation is done. The first is that it evaluates the policy content starting from the agenda setting. So problems. So it's not like that. That the policy evaluation is does just only at the last. And the policy formulation also evaluation is done. Policy implementation process also evaluation is done, and then the policy evaluation definitely as the third stage is automatically done. So it is happening at each stage, and it is happening overall at the end also. So for example, when the agenda setting is done, so it is evaluated again that whether the problem is identified properly, agenda is set properly, prioritization is done properly, stakeholder engagement is done properly, right? So when the implementation, the second stage evaluation is done, whether the policy is implemented the way it was intended or not, right? So there the stated objective and how it is getting implemented should match its effectiveness, and then at the last the policy impact, right? So don't restrict yourself that policy evaluation is happening at the last. Policy evaluation is happening at the first stage also, including the policy formulation. It is happening in the second stage also, and it is happening in the third stage also. But definitely there are some challenges with the policy evaluation, like lack of resources, lack of strong evidences. Like I said, if the data is not correct, right? Okay, if the at the first stage during the policy formulation proper evaluation is not done, then definitely it is going to impact the evaluation at the implementation stage and the evaluation at the policy evaluation stage, I mean the final stage, right? So happening or getting implemented very fast, so this can be a problem. Then policy scrutiny, identifying comparison communities. So these are the few problems of evaluation challenges. Okay, so this I had already done. I'm just keeping in slide for you to understand, I mean, what are the good characteristics of a policy, right? Okay, like it should be clear, it should be understood by all, right? A policy should be stable, a policy should be sincere, like it should be contextualized, a policy should match the people's needs, people's sufferings, people's aspirations. A policy must be realistic. A policy which is impossible to implement, or a policy which is eyeing for a kind of an a kind of an objective which is definitely not realistic. Like suppose if somebody says that by 2021, right, India will be out of poverty, so that is not a realistic goal, right? So creating or designing a realistic goal helps to achieve it, right? So it is very necessary to have a realistic goal so that a realistic policy can implement it, right? So interrelation of the policies should also be taken care of. Then policy should be future proofed, right? Okay, policy should add up for the future goals, and last is the policy is goal based, right? Don't just restrict the characteristic of good policy to just few points, right? You can make your own points the more you understand the policy, or you can break these points into more and can create more ideas for you that what it should be inclusive. A good policy is one of the characteristics of a good policies is that it is it involves people's participation. It is inclusive, right? In the very first slide also we discussed that it is broad, comprehensive. So it's just a summary of what we had done till now. Okay, so it is important that why we study public policy. The first is that the public policy, through it is a scientific understanding of the problems. It is a scientific understanding of what the government is doing, all the governmental activities. It is a scientific understanding through which we go through the various alternatives, and then we choose the most suitable one, right? Public policy is also important, through which we not only understand the problem, but we also understand the problem solving. That is the cause. We study the cause and consequences of the policy, right? Okay, and with the help of a problem, it is a problem solving theory. So with the help of that, we try to be more close. The government, the policymaker tries to be more close to the citizens, understand the social problems more, economical problem more, and tries to solve those problems, right? Study of public policy is also very important, because through this we will be able to understand the policy recommendations, right? Okay, so it can be for the political purpose, right? Like I said, to ensure that the nation adopts the right policies, right, to achieve the right goals. So policy recommendation helps to have a connection, right? Okay, to helps to have a link between the right policies and the right goals. Okay, so this is just a chart. It is in the book also, Thomas Dye, which I had asked you to study. So he had studied in these stages, like problem identification, agenda setting. This all three is a part of a policy formulation. Then legitimation, implementation is policy implementation, and then the evaluation. So it is just a summary I kept here. It's there in the Thomas Dye's book also. Okay, so let me just quickly go through the reading.